Good morning. Please feel free to move around. It's easier to see or hear. I think we have a new component on all this gizmos. So it should be a little bit louder outside today. If it's hard to hear, if you go like this, we can turn it up. You may have noticed the name Billy Berger read into the dedication this morning. Many of you knew Billy. He was a member of our community for many years. He passed away last Thursday evening. He lived here in a trailer beside the temple last year for some time. And so I talked with his sister on Friday. She called to let me know. And there'll be some kind of a memorial that the family will put together, but probably won't be immediately. So please hold him in your thoughts and best wishes, dedicating the merit of practice to his continued journey. Within Buddhism, we don't think of death as an end. We think of it as a gateway, slipping into another realm in which his path will continue. And so that's why when we're chanting and we dedicate merit to people who've passed away, is really an encouragement. That's the purpose of that. Dedication of merit is encouraging them on the path and supporting them on the path that extends beyond what we see easily with our fleshy eyes. So this morning I'd like to make some time for questions and responses. I gave several talks about, I've been titling Psychosomatic Zazen, that the physicality and mentality, the capacity for us to experience things, the quality of our experience, and then the world of objectified or objectified objects. That there's something that we can, there's a way of inquiry in this world that's very central to our particular path. That meditation is not simply calming down, although that's really important, that side of meditation. A kind of serenity emerges, a kind of centeredness emerges, but that there's a other aspect which is about seeing clearly. And seeing clearly is not just, oh, I see the stick clearly, like the objective. It's not that the objectified world becomes more and more clear. It's that the nature of seeing, the clarity which is at the basis of the nature of seeing, is what we practice seeing from there or through there, as opposed to always pushing things out into an objectified world. So I've been trying to go at that in a few different ways the past month or so, and Myobun also gave one talk that was in relationship to that. And so I'm curious about what kinds of questions you might have about that or anything else. That's what we've been talking about, but anything else that you might have a question about would also be fine. Like, how's your arm? Turns out you can do a lot of things without your bicep, but there's a few things you can't do. So I still have my bicep, it's just not connected, so anyway. And if you're in the hall, you can just gasho and then ask a question. If you're in the yard, if you come up to the deck here, then a microphone gets pointed at you. And if you're online, if you can just gasho and then start in. Sometimes two people start asking a question at the same time and we figure it out, but that's kind of become the easiest way. Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about compassion, embracing all beings, forgiveness. It seems I'm talking to a lot of people in my life right now who seem to be struggling with, we tend to load all that with ideas about warm sentimentality, soft feeling, wanting relationship with people. And that seems almost like another way of objectification rather than leaning into seeing people clearly and appreciating them. And it seems to lead to a lot of problems with boundaries for people.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I think you have.
I
You
don't
know, I can say a few more things, but it's so the mind of compassion is or heart of compassion is rooted in spaciousness, and spaciousness has a couple different aspects. One aspect of spaciousness is like the mind of relinquishment. We don't grab onto anything, or we are grabbing onto all kinds of things. We realize it, and we're practicing letting that go. That's one aspect of spaciousness. Another aspect of spaciousness is total intimacy, which means without that grabbing, there's no separation anywhere. Everything is completely pushed up against like this. What happens with kind of sentimentalized compassion is it still has its hooks in a certain sets of feelings, which are not in and of themselves bad, but that they have their limitation. And so our craving for healing, our craving for a real release of the deep suffering, at some point that kind of warmth is really helpful for that, but it can also just keep that karmic loop going, where we're craving after that kind of warmth, and so then we manipulate things to get it. We manipulate things emotionally, and then whose responsibility to do what? Where am I at in a relationship? Everything gets really, really difficult. The way that we are depending on each other can't be clarified. So that's the thing. It's not like a lot of people will say like we shouldn't be depending on other people for our emotional health. Baloney. There's no such thing as emotional health without other beings. But when we're relying on them in a way in which the boundaries are confused, when we're clinging and we have this appetite that can't be satiated and we keep grabbing things and pushing it in, that kind of dependence is a dependence in greed. So what we're trying to do in our practice is to unhook that dependence that's rooted in greed and to see clearly, feel clearly the dependence that is our nature. And then boundaries can be they're much more easy to work with because they're just the expression of our togetherness. The boundary is the expression of our connection as opposed to the expression of our disconnectedness. So I think that's very, what you're talking about is a very important aspect of practice, and sometimes we lean into the compassion much more from a warmth perspective, and that oftentimes is more that like intimate side, everything held together. But sometimes we need to lean into it from the spaciousness side, which is like there's nothing. It's nothing at all. And that can be confusing for us, but especially we're practicing that, we see some truth in it. It can be really confusing for other people who they're hungry for that warmth side. So it's quite a conundrum. Hi.
Could you say some more about relinquishment? Relinquishing?
Yeah. So I would like to connect this back to what I've been talking about the past few weeks, and relating it to objectification. So if we think about the structure of consciousness, is one of its aspects is we can take awareness, and then the awareness goes out and it turns into an object. We hold something with our mind. And that's what I mean by objectification. Objectification has other meanings. Like if you say you objectify someone, it means like you're using them as an object. So that's not the way I'm using the word right now. I'm just saying to create an object, we're involved in that creating of an object. So a practice of relinquishment is we could say loosening the grip on that one-sided process. So where we're only going out, seeing images, holding them, saying it's true, that's what there is, that's what I want, that's how my life is, whatever it is, that's all that process of creating an object with our mind and then holding it in some way. So in relinquishment, we reverse that process. We don't insist that the thing go away. Okay, that's not relinquishment, is insisting that something goes away. It's feeling my own involvement in that thing, and then not trying to get away from my involvement, but in realizing my involvement, a different kind of holding can happen. Yeah, and so when we practice this kind of relinquishment in awareness practice, what we're doing is, as we're sitting in meditation, we're not trying to reject the phenomena that emerge through meditation. That's not the point. The point isn't to get rid of them. The point is to feel that they're not separate, that my involvement is there. And as I feel my involvement with whatever sensations, whether they're things that are coming from a seeming outside world or they're things that are bubbling up from a seeming inside world, that then as I experience my own involvement in that, I can hold them differently. And holding them with an open hand is what we call relinquishment.
Joe,
Hi.
does what you're talking about also tie into the concept of signlessness, and how does that relate?
Signlessness?
Yeah.
Yeah, so signlessness, or sometimes people will say mark, no mark, is another terminology that's used. It's talking about what is unfabricated, what is beyond the graspable. So when we talk about something being signless, we're saying that it can't be grasped in any way. So nirvana, for example, is considered signless. We don't have any capacity to identify it according to a mark. And so when we're practicing this relinquishment that I'm talking about, part of it is a return to that which can't be grasped. We actually never leave what can't be grasped. We never leave the ground of nirvana, but we have all kind of objectifications that are pulling us into a kind of a dream, a kind of a story. And those aren't bad. It's just that when they totally lift off of nirvana, like they become self-contained and we become unaware of this other possibility, then the suffering gets stuck. So we practice this kind of relinquishment, this kind of awareness, as a way to intuit, because you can't see it, right? It's not a way to see nirvana. It's a way to intuit from the place from which nirvana sees. So that's what we're trying to do, to see the same way as a Buddha. So that's what the Vipassana meditation, or that clear seeing, is that we want to see like a Buddha. So we have to act like a Buddha. And the Buddha is always releasing that grasp on the objectified thing. Does that tie it together?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. You can step just inside there, and then he'll point at us.
All right. Hey,
Hi.
so last weekend, I think if I hear you clearly and understood you clearly, was that you were talking about imagination and our imaginative mind.
Yeah.
And then you were saying that we don't necessarily want to get rid of our imaginative mind because you're a conscious being. There is no way we can do that. Mm-hmm. But I thought I heard that, or understood you, if I understood you correctly, was that the point is to kind of clarify our imaginative mind. And I was thinking about that throughout the week, and I guess I'm just trying to understand it better, of what would a clear imaginative mind look like, and how does it help us see the world and life around us better?
Yeah, well, beautiful. So the place we can start is, again, studying how our imagination is involved in any kind of seeing, anything we experience. Our imagination is involved. But what we're oftentimes doing, or I would argue most of the time what we're doing, is we're ignoring that part. Like, my imagination isn't involved. I'm just seeing the stick. It's just there, right? I just see the stick because it's there. My imagination has nothing to do with it. What I'm saying is our imagination has a lot to do with it, that our imagination is working, but that we tie our imagination to this idea that there are real things and there are unreal things, and that I'm just going to try to hook my imagination to the real things. They have some kind of objective reality, some kind of truth in themselves. So physical things are like that, right? You know, and it's true. Like, you don't want to go walking out in the street, you know, because you're like, oh, my imagination is involved in the creation of this car. That doesn't mean the car won't hit you. It still will hit you, but your imagination is involved in the whole experience of there being a car. So, clarifying the imagination isn't to like make the imagination go away, but it's that connection between what we experience and imagination not having to be so pulled apart. Because we've been taught a lot, like, well, it's fine, you can fantasize, you know, you can daydream, whatever, but that's just in your head. It's not real. And then we kind of undervalue the imagination. What I'm saying here is, if we realize imagination is involved in all kinds of things, then that part of ourself that can see beyond just how things are, it can be active when we're seeing things. We can see possibility. We can see another option than the one that we see when we just say, oh, this is how it is. My feelings, for example, when you feel a certain way and you're feeling it, you're like, wow, I feel down, for example. If you think that's just a real feeling that your imagination isn't involved in, you just keep replicating it. You just say, oh, I feel this way, I feel this way, I feel this way, I feel this way, I feel this way. But with your imagination involved, you can see that, oh, this feeling just is what it is. And I'm part of it, and it is part of me. It's not a thing. Then my mind can move to different places. My feelings can move. I'm not controlling them, right? But now they have room in which to grow and flow and experience in different ways. So that's what I'm talking about in the clarifying of the imagination, is recognizing our participation, that our imagination is always happening, and then saying, okay, ease up on the clamp down on what's real, and then feel how what's real and my imagination are moving together. And then you have other kind of possibilities that you don't when you're just kind of clamping things down. And as part of what I was saying last week, we have a lot of teachings around that, especially the very imaginal teachings within the religious tradition. So that's why I was reading from the Lotus Sutra, because it's so out there. You know, it's like a sci-fi movie or like a fantasy movie. We need that, is what I'm saying. We need that part of us. And so sometimes we go into the part where it's very, very imaginative, not so connected to the physical world. We really need that. And the religious teachings can teach us there. But other things can too, you know, art and poetry and movies and ideas, all those kinds of things. But as those are flowing, then the way they connect with the world can be more balanced. So I think I'm saying something kind of complicated, but I'm trying to say it not in a kind of clear way. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
It does.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question online.
Hi.
What does it mean to put a sandal on one's head?
Put a sandal on one's head? If I had a sandal, I would use that. That shows up in some teaching stories, and it hits on many layers. This is the clearest one, but I'll offer another one. Sometimes it is used as a symbol of inversing the order of things. So a sandal goes on the foot, not on the head. So sometimes you read in a story of an ancestor, they'll put the sandal on their head, and that can be kind of symbolic of things being inverted or upside down. Not necessarily bad. Yeah.
I have been struck a lot by this idea of how images are really cheap right now. Not right now, for decades, but especially how we're continually consuming stories and images. And I think this maybe dovetails a little bit with the question about clarifying the imagination, but I'm not sure. I've been finding myself with stories, with experiences, feeling this kind of tension where I want to be able to allow those experiences and stories to be sacred, but I also really want to process them. And I find myself sharing a story, something I've experienced or I've read about in the newspaper, whatever, and feeling like I'm just like, I don't like participating in this kind of pornographic like consumption of, and really torn. I'm just wondering for guidance for how do we hold the things that are flooding us, mind and heart and eyes? How do we venerate them but not kind of stuff it?
Yeah. The core practice here, as I encounter it, is to realizing through the practice of it that these stories and images flow both directions. We tend to get caught in one or the other. So it's an aperture, it's like a pupil, and there essentially is no directionality. But because we're in an environment now where we've become very greedy for image, and we have technologies, we've created a world which will respond to that. And you can see just like how, in yourself, how unsettled you are, because you need to see the next thing, you need to see the next thing, you need to see the next thing. And sometimes that's visual, sometimes it's an idea, sometimes it's a feeling, it could be a lot of things, but we have such a flood this direction that the movement the other direction I feel is really in danger, is atrophying for almost everyone, because we don't have that full respect for what moves in this direction. So that's part of what I'm saying, that feeling that I'm involved in whatever experience I'm having, whatever object of my awareness, my participation is there. That's the movement that goes this direction, rather than only feeling the movement that goes this direction. Then that is what's sacred, that this heart and objects are not separate. That is the mind of Buddha. So I think we have many layers there to work with in terms of society, like thinking, are we really gonna keep doing it like this? It's gonna be a big problem. But on an individual level, I think that's where the real practice is.
Can you say a little bit more of the practice? Because sometimes what I find is I'm trying to allow something to inhabit inside, but then I feel like I'm going to explode because it's too big. Yeah. I can't hold it, and I don't really know. Literally, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, probably exploding.
It's messy.
It's messy. Yeah. But as we, these are these core instructions we hear again and again from ancestors, particularly in Dogen Zenji's line, to take the backward step that turns the light and shines it back. Or Wanshi Zenji says to take the backward step that immediately reaches the center of the circle from which light issues forth. This stepping back is relinquishment. It is a kind of total acceptance that there is receiving and employing, and that place in in meditation, you know, it is not wrong that we'll feel like I'm going to explode or totally burning up, or energy is shooting through me in ways I don't understand, or to have some kind of a fear about, if I really trust this, what's going to happen. This is one of the reasons that the samatha side of the meditation is so emphasized now, because it's safe in the way that we can calm down. It's not safe in that then we start to dull our life, we start to stiffen things. That's not safe. That's really dangerous, actually, but it happens slowly. It's dangerous, like, you know, like not exercising for a long time is dangerous, as opposed to like walking on a thin rail up high in the air is dangerous. That's samatha and meditation is dangerous that way. Whereas the vipassana type of meditation is dangerous more in that immediate way, like you know, like we're working with things that are powerful. So so I think having some trepidation there is appropriate.
I've never torn my bicep tendon, but I imagine that there's some amount of physical pain, and I was curious if you could talk about how you practice with that and how that plays into the shamatha vipassana balance.
Yeah, great question. This time actually is kind of amazing. It felt very strange to tear it, but it wasn't painful. And then the doctors kept like, "Is it hurt? You know, do you need painkillers?" Like, no, it hasn't been. Every once in a while, I'll move away. That's a little funny, and it kind of twinges, like my muscle's trying to do something, but it can't do it. So for this, I haven't had to work with pain so much, but of course, I have had pain in my life, like in this case, talking about physical pain. Is a great teacher, and I think there's a couple ways in which it's a great teacher. One is it demands our attention. You know, it commands our attention. And so that's one of the things we don't like about it, because we prefer to be able to say, I don't want to feel that right now. So it commands our attention, and it teaches us something about awareness, and how awareness is so easily wants to flit to something else, and how tired we get paying attention to something. And in that way, like even in sitting meditation when we experience pain, not just pulling away from the pain right away is really a good study, to stay present with the pain, not just think, oh, I have to get rid of it somehow. So it really teaches us about attention and awareness. Another way that it's a good teacher, and although I'm not experiencing a lot of pain, this is alive in this injury for me, is it requires us to soften. So like we're sitting in meditation experiencing a lot of pain, and we're studying it. We're studying what it does to awareness and all of those things. But at some point, maybe we need to move. And we need to stretch out a little bit. We need to find a different way to sit, right? Not just hold the image of being, I am the Zazen, you know, I am the stone Buddha that will not move. So those two are almost opposite of each other. They seem to be, but as we experience both sides, they come closer together, and we can uncover this heart, which is a heart which can stay with pain. And those are the same. Staying with pain means sometimes not doing anything, and sometimes staying with pain means to respond to pain and to try to do something with it. And they're really the same thing, but we feel them in different ways. So that it teaches us this kind of complete thing, but like uses two hands to do it.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is surprisingly related to the last one. I've enjoyed, coming the past few weeks and hearing of that psychosomatic Zen. I guess my question is a bit on the somatic side of that. My memory's really bad. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but you mentioned something that's resonated. Us being steeped in this Western culture, traditionally there's that sharp divide between mind and body. And I wonder what you might say about, those whose practice may have superseded the body and at times ignored the body deliberately in order to increase that mind portion of it. And for one who might be trying to reincorporate a division that may have never been there in the first place.
So this is very, very common. In fact, we use the term spiritual, and in that sense, spirit is usually a word that refers to the ascendant. Like, I'm going to leave all of this material. And we talk it that way too. We say, I'm not my body. And there's this me that is really the true thing. This body's just a container. And in many religious traditions, that's the understanding. So it's very, very common if we're spiritually involved, active, that we will pick up that quality of ascending. And one of the things I really appreciate about this tradition is that right from the beginning is almost the opposite. Like, if you come for introduction to meditation, someone will say, fold your legs up, or sit in a chair, or sit on a bench. Let's get your body in a place where you can feel its wholeness. Doesn't mean everything's going to be hunky-dory, but it means now I'm going to pay attention to the embodied being that is here. And from there, I'm going to learn to consider the breath, which is this kind of connection between the body and the heart or the mind. So I'm going to consider the breath as an intermediary, and then I'm going to consider the mind, but never as separate things. We're always considering them as having their own, that they're all like three aspects of the same thing. So I think that this way that this kind of meditation or zazen is really helpful in taking a very vertical experiences that we may have had and integrating with the horizontal. It's really true in a Buddhist environment in general, but particularly in Zen temples. You'll notice that the aesthetic is horizontal. That's not because there's no ascendancy, but it's because it's always integrated. We're always looking for that integrated approach, not like get rid of that one for this one, or get rid of this one for that one. But that's a general idea. Do you have any kind of specific things?
To follow up on that, I think that what I may be looking for as well to incorporate is an element of compassion for that body. For that physical sense, whereas that may have been perceived as in other traditions that what's hold us back.
And you can do that really. You could cultivate that really consciously, and now it's very popular for people to talk about self-care, and I think that's really important. And what I want to say here is something that is a little bit more fundamental than self-care. It's not so far away as what do I need to do to take care of myself, although that's important. But it's something that's a little bit closer, which is am I feeling it? This is a thing you can do. When you take a shower, notice, do you feel anything that's happening in the shower? Or do you just play the shower loop? Right? Showers are amazing. Soap, it's like soap on your skin is wonderful. You don't have to like that if you don't like it, but I'm saying I really like it. It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. But how much we just go, oh, shower time, okay, go do the next thing. Got to take a shower and wash off the stink. That's kind of where we are. But we don't really feel. We go out somewhere to the idea of it. And so that would be an example of a kind of thing that can really be consciously cultivated. um, one of my teachers in Japan, Itabashi Zenji, he said something I'll never forget. He was talking about modern society and how cerebral we've become, and we're always looking to not be lonely. And in our attempt to not be lonely, we're just constantly watching the TV or listening to the radio. This was before cell phones that he was talking about this. And he said, it used to be that you're by yourself and you're feeling lonely and you just have a cup of tea. And then this is what he said that just really stuck with me. He said, and that cup of tea itself is loneliness. He didn't say I make a cup of tea and I'm not lonely anymore. Or you make a cup of tea and now you have something to distract you. He said that cup of tea itself is loneliness. And that is how we live out practice. There's some deep compassion in that, to not try to get away from the difficulty of our embodiment, but to find the ways in which we can pay really direct attention. In the case of loneliness, we're talking about an emotional part of our embodiment. But in our physical part of embodiment is so intertwined there. And these little habits end up being really huge. And then they support us in a practice of meditation, and then the meditation connects back with them and can be helpful to keep the energy from rising in kind of funny ways. You're welcome.
So I wonder what your thinking is around the challenges that many people have regarding self-care. I've watched myself, I've watched others struggle to give themselves the same kind of respect and TLC that they would give someone else they loved. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
So at the root, it connects back with what I was just saying. I think there's a root cause that is good for us to pay attention to. And in that root is objectification. So as we objectify this direction, we objectify this direction. And in the objectifying this direction, we have tighter and tighter control. Because it's inside, we have that instinct to lock it down more and more and more, and then our ideals of the way it is that I should be become so dominant there. So even when we see there should be compassion for people, we can do it this direction, but then we can't do it the other direction. But I think at the base, that same basic problem of objectification is there. In the meditation, there's a way we can sit meditation, which is just really kind of like flogging ourselves. And it's like, I'm not calm, or I'm not this, or I'm not that, and I'm just sit here kind of stewing in it. I think there can be some skillfulness in just staying with that, even though it's kind of painful. But for the purpose of learning about the way it is that we're inflicting that on ourself, not for the purpose, that itself is not noble. We want to learn from it about what is another kind of possibility. And then in doing that, I think we build a sensitivity to what is caring, what is caring for ourselves. But in that way, it can be very tricky. I think we have a very indulgent society, and so oftentimes we say self-care, and then we think have chocolate, which I love.
There's a problem with that.
There's no problem, no. But we then take that objectified thing as being what's going to care for us, and we may miss the point that there's something in this deeper dynamic that's happening. So how does the chocolate actually reach that grumpy tyrant inside of me that won't share the same kindness with myself that it will with others? How does the chocolate get all the way there, I think, is one of the conundrums. Because sometimes I'm just throwing the chocolate to to kind of, what do you call that? Like sidetrack the awareness of it, as opposed to it really leading down. And that's where I find practice to be really powerful, because it asks us to to try to come down to that grumpy tyrant. And because the grumpy tyrant also has to wake up and needs compassion.
So it's intention.
Yeah. So it's intention in the sense of where do we direct our intention, but it's also intention in the sense of what is the nature of how I am enacting intention. And that's what we're trying to study in meditation, is what's the nature of how intention is enacting a world, the heart and the world not being separate. So as I study that, then I can start to see that it's not just that I want to have the intention to be kind to myself as well as others, but the way with which I intend has everything to do with that kindness. And, I don't think it's so bad that we can find it out there first and then learn to turn it back this direction. But it's very easy for those two to get split and then just to really polarize one direction or another, especially if you're in a helping profession, which I know you are. I know I am. I know many people, maybe all professions really are helping professions. I don't know what would it be actually, but no matter what we're doing, where we're trying to, it's such a beautiful thing. We're trying to serve the world. I really don't know anybody who their job is just about caring for themselves. I mean, there probably are some people, but I've never met them. Even people who are doing really like things that you would think like, oh, I'm a stockbroker or whatever. It's like, how do we serve the world? That's in us somewhere. So as we're pouring that out, how does it pour back the other direction? I think that's really the study. And sometimes it includes something kind of strict, caring for ourselves. Like now I think that self-care thing oftentimes is like a little bit like you were saying earlier on, like a very soft. And that side's really, really important. But sometimes self-care is like, do your glute activation exercises, Ejo, or like go for a walk. Not just drive myself to do the things I'm supposed to do exercise-wise, but actually feel how my life is better if I do those, things. And so that's where I think the soft is really important, but it's not comprehensive. Mm-hmm.